Hello, everyone, and welcome. So in this session today, we will be highlighting what is new in our recent SpinFire release. So we have version 11.7 to share with you today, and we'll be highlighting some of those new capabilities through practical application in our demonstration, and I'll be highlighting some of those in the session today. So on our call, we have Mark Anderson, and he'll be sharing the demo portion later on. And I am your host, Scott Miller, and I'm responsible for marketing here at Actify. To make sure this is an efficient use of everyone's time, I've laid out a brief agenda. So stay with me for 5 minutes and I'll provide you with an overview and also highlight some of the noteworthy features before Mark jumps into our product demonstration. This is a live webinar, so for those of you that are joining us live, you have the benefit of asking us questions. So I'd encourage you to use the facility, submit any questions that you have in that chat facility within the webinar application, and we have a dedicated session at the end where we'll try and answer as many questions as we can. Don't worry if we don't get around to your answer or your question, we will follow up with you directly, so all questions will be answered. So very briefly, I'm going to cover what's new. I'm going to touch on some performance improvements, identify some new features, UI improvements, some of the importer updates, new importers, and also new importer options. And I'll hand over to Mark, who'll discuss some licensing and activation improvements, as well as provide our demo portion. I'd like to stress that this, due to time limitations, is just going to be an overview and a flavor of some noteworthy features. So I would encourage you to always reference the help site where we have the detailed list of what is new and bug fixes included within our release notes. There's a link for your convenience there, but if you search Actify Help, you should find the site within search organically. So firstly, touching on performance improvements. Now internally, we've done some benchmarking. Instead of sharing the file with you for reasons of keeping the file confidential, we're highlighting some of the facets and details so that you can understand what was included in this benchmark. We use 3 or several different file formats: STEP, CATIA v5, and SolidWorks in this example, and a variation of file sizes. So you can see the STEP files, 565 megabytes, down to SolidWorks 113. So some array of different file sizes, and also the surface count from 364,000 surfaces to 42,000 to try and view the performance differentiation. We've also used a consistent machine as well with the spec noted at the bottom here, an Intel i7 processor, and using the NVIDIA GeForce graphics card. So what we'll show you just now is the section cut performance. So this is when you select section cut feature and the time that it would take to load that pane and perform the cut. On the left in the orange is your 11.6.4 version. On the right in the blue is the latest 11.7 release. So as you can see with those different file formats, we are seeing some consistent performance improvement. These times are stated in milliseconds, but it gives you a flavor of the type of improvements that you can see. This benchmark was done enabling the sort of debug setting that the developers have and comparing the application side by side. So a real world scenario, you might not have the ability or the luxury to compare these two versions side by side, but hopefully you'll experience, maybe not viewing it live on the webinar today, the performance, because you're streaming it over the internet, but when you're using this application on your desktop, you'll be able to see these performance improvements. Another is the selection window. So that's the ability to drag and drop via control or shift, right click, and selecting several components. Now that time has now been reduced with the improvement of 11.7. Another example is the time it takes for loading a file. So consistently, again, the same step, CATIA v5 and SolidWorks file, we're seeing that even with 11.4 to 11.7, there is improvement in the loading time. What you'll notice is the addition of a third column here, which is load surfaces on demand. So that's a concept that Mark will probably highlight and share during the demonstration, but that aspect is improving not just the loading time, but also, as you can see on this page, memory usage. And I'd like to show that, as you see, the step file was larger, and we are seeing even greater improvements on larger files. So that will be good news for our clients with large files. On this particular page, you're seeing that Well, we have the blue columns that are now much larger than the orange. Why is that? That isn't to suggest that this now takes longer. This particular benchmark is reviewing the amount of SpinFire update counts, or the refresh rate, if you will, in which we're able to improve the responsiveness and the user experience when doing some on-screen manipulation of the file, such as pan, zoom, and rotate. So you're able to see an improved user experience when moving and manipulating large files on the screen. Introduction to some new features. So we have the parts properties charts. Now the part property charts and also the ability to add a custom attribute to the assembly tree is just an example of how SpinFire is enriching with the metadata context with the 3D view. So we're improving and acknowledging the value that data brings. And with these two features that Mark will highlight, you'll be able to see how we're able to increase and improve the context of viewing the metadata in the view of the 3D part. So part properties charts, that allows you to visualize the assembly, but also view the metadata for the parts, the physical properties, both in a sort of chart form like displayed here, but also in a table form of data. This can also be used then for presentations and spreadsheets to improve visual analysis and reporting. When we're looking at some of the UI improvements, you'll see on the left here, it's the ability to dock some of your task or feature bars in a preferable place, whether it's the right-hand side, left-hand side, and being able to customize that layout to suit your preference to hopefully aid your user experience and improve some of the productivity to navigate features more quickly if there's a preference as to where those tools should lie. A returning feature, which is the Act3D thumbnail within the Windows Explorer. It's a very simple yet powerful feature because with the ability to preview the file in a thumbnail, it gives you context to what that file contains without then having to maybe wait a few minutes for the file to load. It's simple but powerful, and as I said, it's a returning feature. Grouped importers is also just a UI improvement to help improve efficiency. We've grouped the importer actions so that finding and changing those options is a little more intuitive as they're grouped together. As we move on to new importers and new importer updates, the list on the left represents brand new importers for SpinFire. So we've got Revit, 3ds Max, Collada, FBX, and also supporting OBJ and 2D PDF. I think 2D PDF is a returning importer support because we used to have that before, and also the list of importer updates on the right. Now this is a long list to digest, and it's all on the release notes, but I also like to draw your attention to this document on our website, supported CAD file format. So if you were to visit actify.com/documents, this is a live document. So as you keep returning to this document over time, it will always display the latest and current version of our supported file formats for SpinFire and our Sensor solution. So I would encourage you to source this file from our website and reference it as we continue to release updates because it will contain the latest versions. Moving on to new importer options. On another importer option we have is the ability to add random color generator to file formats such as STL, ProE, step files. This is valuable to help identify different components rather than coming in as a unified gray object. And 3D PDF calling out this option because we appreciate that 3D PDF as a format is highly used to improve external communication and collaboration. So to support with that, we've improved some of the permissions around a 3D PDF export. So improving that permission and control on what data is shared externally is an important consideration when collaborating, and we now deliver you some of those capabilities inside our new importer options. And at this point in time, I'm going to pass over to Mark because Mark's going to share some of the changes that we've made to our licensing and activation. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Scott. Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Yeah, so as Scott mentioned, I'll start off with licensing. some of you may have noticed or may have encountered licensing issues with 11.7. This is because there is a requirement now to because of these because of the many improvements and features that have been added to surrounding licensing. The floating license manager needs to be the latest version, which is 11.16. 11.16. So if you go into the LM tools, just quickly show you how to check this. You just need to go to the help and about, and you can see here the versioning, and it's last year's date. So that is essential if you want to be able to activate your floating licenses for 11.7. Another feature that I know some of you have been waiting for some time now is the means to configure timeouts for floating licenses. So what you see here with my actifid.opt file is if I have my SpinFire open and I'm not using the application for 15 minutes, I will first be given a warning, pop-up warning, to say that the license is going to be deactivated unless I start using the application, and then it will finally deactivate your license and send it back to the floating license manager. So the minimum timeout that you can set is 15 minutes. You can set that to whatever value you prefer. I know for some of you this may resolve. So those of you that have had issues on your network, and you have colleagues that have exited SpinFire, but it hasn't released the license back to the server. This is now one of the best ways to resolve such issues is to set a timeout for your floating license. And also when you install or upgrade the floating license manager, I would advise you to first stop the server before copying in the .dat file, because I've noticed that this causes issues for the service, which means as soon as you paste the new file in, you can then you start encountering issues trying to start or reread the license file, and then you end up having to terminate the processes in your task manager. So the simplest way to avoid those types of issues is to ensure that you stop the server first, copy the new license file in, and then do the start server and reread. The reread's very important, obviously, because you are uploading the updated license file to your license manager. And just for your awareness, there is an issue we've become aware of where when you do the network activation, so you activate your license, your floating license, the .dat is updating, but we've noticed instances of where the license.al file is not updated. So bear in mind that in such scenarios, I would recommend to just delete the files and go do your and reactivate and do another network activation to grab the fresh files from the server. If you are using if there's instances where you have a specified port for your floating license manager, please remember that with specified ports you must also include that when you manually do the network activation, so as in filling in the credentials for the server and then the port that's specified, that's being used by the floating license manager. So I think, and yes, so I just want to also bring to your attention that the license service status has also been updated. This gives you much more information now. Before, you would only see how many license files were in use. You can now, in fact, see which users on your network are using the license, their machine, when they check that file out, when they may have borrowed the file, and when that borrowed license is expected to expire, which then means it goes back into the pile, and someone else can then use that license. file. So so that's what I want to mention about licensing. Coming across to the 3D viewer page under our settings, one of the new settings we have is the ignore Act3D and .3D background color and gradient values. So this is very useful where you may have certain users that prefer to use specific background colors for the files. So with this setting enabled, you can ignore what background colors have been saved to that file. That also applies to any files produced from our Centro product as well. So if that has what you deem to be the wrong color, or a color or a color that's not convenient, then all you need to do as a SpinFire user is just to enable this setting, just to ignore what was originally saved in that 3D file. Also on this page, we have the load surfaces on demand, as as Scott mentioned briefly. So this is in instances where you have assemblies with an exceptional amount of surfaces in the assembly tree, instead of waiting longer for all the assembly, including all those surfaces, to be loaded by SpinFire, if you use this setting instead, then it's only going to load those surfaces when it becomes necessary. So if you're drilling down your assembly tree, at that point those surfaces would load those specific set of surfaces, rather than waiting longer for the file to open and it's loading all the surfaces. So that's just one of the ways, one of many things we've done in terms of options and optimization and performance improvements with 11.7. As Scott mentioned, we also have the At3D preview working again on Windows. This was something that was unfortunately broken by Microsoft when they decided to change something in their code, but we have this working again now on 11.7. So we have this. So that does depend on the At3D actually being saved with this setting on, by the way. So the 3D preview. So if this is my C executor here is a file I've saved with that setting on. You can see here, I can see the thumbnail of that. If I click the low 3D preview, I can now rotate the model, zoom in, etc. On the topic of PMI, we have an additional setting now. This one's called front rendered PMI, so PMI that might be in front of other items in the workspace. We also have let's see, we have over to the to the importer page. So as Scott has mentioned, we have those new importers. You can see some of these are here grouped together. We also have a lot of updates for the existing importers. Many of these, the Autodesk ones, have been updated to 2018, 2019's. Sorry, Pro-E, SolidWorks, Solid Edge, all these have received the latest versions. And also, in addition to these various updates to importers and new importers, which by the way are included in the base pack of SpinFire, we also have an wireframe option now for more formats. We also have random colors, as Scott had also mentioned, for these formats, Pro-E, Creo, Step, etc. We have, just a reminder, each importer of course has the options, each have different options relevant to that importer, but what I'm using here is the all options, just in case that wasn't clear. And I'm using the search up here just to narrow down the search of all these options for the importers. I'm just narrowing it down to the ones that have had changes or updates or have been or new inclusions. So there's wireframe for Rhino formats now. There is 2D hidden entities as well has now been added. And so that's some of the new options for the importers. Oh yes, I just remembered. This is under the tree management. So the display tree attribute name. So any metadata that we're able to extract from the CAD files, we now have this option now to display a specific set of metadata information alongside the assembly tree names. So in this case, I have this assembly that I know has that has one called material. So going across to my workspace for this file, let's just expand the tree. Oh, yeah, expand it over here. So we can now see the material. Let's just move this a bit. So we can see all kinds of different materials, brass, steel, and all those different materials against the assembly name. So this is probably going to be more useful for those that for in instances where you have more than one name for an assembly part. So there may be a name that is more relevant to a third-party supplier, and then you have a name, of course, that's relevant to you internally. So this would be one of those instances where you'd be able to see such information side by side. So that's a very neat new feature in this release. We also have changes to our errors and warnings and output. So this used to have a different name, and I think there was different information that was available. There's better information. There's more meaningful information now about the files. So in this case, obviously, with this particular assembly, I don't have any errors or warnings to indicate any kind of corruption of the file. But this also lets me know if there's any missing assembly parts as well. So if you have an issue that's not preventing you open the file, but there's something wrong with the file in the file once you get inside, then certainly this is something I would suggest to have a look at, is just to see what any information in here about the file that might give you a bit of insight about what may be going on before you try contacting our support team. Let's see, we also have, as Scott mentioned, the new options for 3D PDF. So when I go to export and I go to permissions, sorry, here you can of course configure how secure you want the file to be, what you want to allow the user to be able to do with the file once they have it. So that's so given PDF is something you'll share externally, or all kinds of different individuals, being able to lock down that PDF file is very useful indeed. We also have, some of you may have seen this in previous webinars, we have the shortcut toolbar. So this can have any of these measurements in these drop downs, I can have it in this toolbar here. So I don't have to go up here and look for it or click it every time I want to use it. I can just have it here in front of me, available now. And something you may have noticed is I in fact had it as part of my the viewer. This is also new in 11.7. So any of these can be dragged out of their usual position, and it can be put somewhere else. But let's put that one back over here. And the same can be done with the toolbar up here as well. And of course, if I want to hide and show my control tool shortcut toolbar, I can do Control T on my keyboard. That's always neat to be able to do that. So let's see. We also have, as Scott has shown you in one of his screenshots, we have the part properties charts. So again, on that topic of metadata, this is just another nice way of being able to interpret that raw information in a more visual manner. So I'm just going to go, because we're familiar with some of the stuff we saw in the from materials here, I'm going to use that again. And this will give me a better idea in terms of quantity of how much of the assembly is using what material. So we have the bronze here, so 27 parts are using the bronze. We have the iron, the stainless steel. And if I just move my model here, if I click on, let's do stainless steel, and you'll see there that it will now take that, it will just expand that just a little bit, just to highlight that you've selected it in the pie chart. And we can also, although maybe I'll just try a different one, because it might be, oh, actually I did see that, apologies. Let's go back to that one. One moment, let's just try another. There we go. Okay, that's a bit strange. That was working early on, but by selecting all these different materials, you're also selecting those parts in the assembly tree. You're also highlighting it on the workspace itself. So that's nice that's one nice way to just to see what the extent of that material in this case is being used in the workspace. And just on this topic of visually interpreting the information about the file, we also have the rule-based coloring. I know this is 11.6.4, but it just feels very relevant to some of these, to the type of features that we've been developing in recent times. So if the conditions of my rule match the parts will be green. If they do not match, they're red. If they're not available, they're gray. We then, when we add the rule, I will choose, let's say, the physical, then the volume, and then let's say the value, and we want that value to be greater than or equal to, let's say, 100,000. And once you analyze that file, that will normally take at least a minute or so, but we're a bit short on time. So just to show you a result of that, we now have the parts returned that are greater than or equal this value that are green. The parts that are not are red. So again, it just highlights the kind of things we can do in SpinFire to visually represent the information that we have on the file. So I believe that's everything I want to cover today. Thank you for attending. I'll now pass you back to Scott. Let us know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, and thanks for sharing. I believe that especially those last couple of features that you shared are not only visually interesting, but I think they do provide a very nice way to improve, at least provide a new way maybe to navigate around not just the 3D model, but being able to have that way to traverse and navigate by metadata. And just to stress that beyond part properties, if the metadata contained inside the CAD file include author or engineer or file formats, etc., all of this could be grouped and classified by the chart, also being able to reflect those groups visually in the 3D view, providing maybe a context and view of your data that you may not have had before. So we've had a couple of questions come in. We've had a question from Andy, and I've reached out to you directly to say that we'll contact you after this webinar to address your specific concern. I have another one from James asking about a feature called batch conversion. Batch conversion, James, is on our roadmap for SpinFire. I don't have an estimated date at this point in time, but we'll keep you posted on the batch converter feature. If there's no other questions at this point in time, and if you do keep firing them through, we can also follow up with you directly after this call if any questions do come through. So I'd like to thank you for your time today. Anyone else who has any questions, you can reach out to their account manager. It's been our pleasure to share with you some of the releases and features in 11.7. And from all of us at the Actify team, we hope you have an enjoyable rest of your day. So thanks, everyone.